now we come into the last part of it. Something I should absolutely make clear, and it should have been obvious to you if you've been following your notes. The list of Supreme Court decisions that I'm going over is different, not the same as the list of Supreme Court decisions that are in your notes. I had some second thoughts about that list. I wanted to make it a bit smaller, but I also wanted to be absolutely clear about the cases I was doing. You will be tested on the list I'm lecturing about. You will be tested on the list that I've been going over. So, to be clear, Marbury versus Madison, 1803. McCulloch versus Maryland, 1819. Gibbons versus Ogden, 1824. Worcester versus Georgia, 1832. Charles River Bridge versus Warren Bridge, 1837. Dred Scott versus Sanford, 1857. Mann versus Illinois, 1877. Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896. Weeks versus the United States, 1914. Buck versus Bell, 1927. Neer versus Minnesota, 1931. Wickard versus Filburn, 1942. And now we are going into the last four courts up to the present time. The Warren Court, as I have said, is the most judicially active court in American history. And all of their decisions are circled in red. The Burger Court follows. Warren Court goes from 1953 to 1969, and again, fundamentally changes the balance within the United States in terms of the role of government, the norms of society, the role of tradition, and the balance between public safety on the one hand and personal liberties and civil rights on the other hand. The Burger Court continues much in the line of Warren's in terms of being judicially active, but is somewhat less aggressive than the Warren Court. Burger's tenure is from 1969 through 1986. In 1986, it becomes the Rehnquist Court, and the Rehnquist Court is a bit more conservative than the Burger Court, who was a bit more conservative than the Warren Court. The Warren Court was way not conservative. And the Rehnquist Court runs from 86 through 2005. And its tenure is the time when the Supreme Court nomination process became extremely political. And the Roberts Court is the current court. Chief Justice Roberts was appointed by President George W. Bush in 2005, and 15 years later, he is still the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The Roberts Court is a bit more conservative than the Rehnquist Court, but unlike Rehnquist, who was willing to grab the bull by the horns when necessary and settle political disputes like the dispute between Al Gore and George Bush in the 2000 election, and the question of how recounts were going to take place in the state of Florida and the constitutional crisis that we were facing because one party refused to accept the results of the election, is that the Supreme Court under Rehnquist made a decision, no, we're not going to pick and choose counties in Florida where we're going to cherry pick votes and recount. If you're going to recount, it has to be the entire state. The entire state, not cherry pick counties. And at that point, it was over. Roberts personally is very interested in not making the Supreme Court a legislative branch. And his form of anti-judicial activism, his form of original constructivism, says that you defer to the legislature or the executive when possible. And if the legislative and the executive pushes something like Obamacare, then it should be a legislative process or a political process involving electing new presidents and new Congress to get rid of it. He personally stood in the way of the Supreme Court getting rid of Obamacare, and we'll talk about that decision in a little bit. So there's my transition lecture, and we will come back to the Warren Court next time.